Verhelak Sol. I am Skeggy Vetter, and welcome to the Norse Code. This episode is going to be a little different. So I recently had the pleasure of sitting down with author and podcaster Wayne Brekke. Wayne has a new book out, The Complete Guide to Runes, and he hosts the podcast, the Rune Ways Podcast. We had a fantastic talk about the runes and what it means and how to use them. So please sit back and enjoy our conversation. All right, folks, we are on with Wayne Brekke, author and podcaster. Thanks for coming on, Wayne.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So you have a new book out, an introduction to runes, or a full story of runes.
It's pretty much it's like an introduction to runes. It's a complete guide to runes, and well, that's what the title is. But it's a really good introduction for people that have already been studying, as well as brand new people that are just getting into runes as well.
Well, I got to say, I've taken a look through your book, and I have a lot of books on runes, and a lot of them have the same information, you know, where the runes came from and what their meanings are, and very, very bare bones basics of how to use them, which you have all that information in your books, but then you take it a whole step further than most books, and you start going into the magic and how to use them for magic.
Right. That was kind of the purpose, I think. A little backstory on the book. I was basically writing another book. I've had information for a few years, and I was just trying to figure out a way to write a book, get it published. Everybody tells me I'm supposed to write a book. And then I got Callisto had pinged me for creating a book for them, for their titles. And it was great because they were able to give me not only an outline for the book and what they were wanting to have in it, but they gave me a lot of, I guess, discretion. I get to do pretty much all those are my own meanings, and I was able to put stuff in there on, pretty much put in some information that I felt was really valuable for people that are just starting out, and some things that I saw that weren't in other books as well. And that was kind of my point when I started pitching it to them about, here's some content that I want to add in there, because I feel like most people aren't necessarily going to pick up the runes and start reading for people as a profession, but they certainly will take them and utilize them in their own practice, whatever they're doing, whether it's a Nordic practice or whether it's just a straight up witchcraft practice or spiritual practice as well. So I kind of wanted to get all that in there. So I'm glad you noticed.
Well, yeah. And, that's pretty much how I landed. I don't do readings for other people. I always just do it for myself. And I do practice witchcraft, if you can't tell from my background here.
Yeah.
So my foray into magic with the runes has been just using the runes themselves within a spell, or creating bind runes, which I've done a whole episode on bind runes. But you actually take it in a form that's more witchcraft like, almost using them like a sigil. And I found that quite interesting, and that section of your book I'm probably going to end up reading and rereading several times. I think that could become very useful.
Yeah, I was really wanting to make sure that this was a practical book. I look at it like a workbook, so I encourage people to underline stuff, highlight it in the book, bookmark, write notes in the sides, because it really is kind of a workbook that way. And I kind of wanted it to be something that was accessible to people of every type of spiritual practice, because I feel that runes are like that. For me, my rune practice is on a practical way where I think that they're the most versatile tools in magic, you might say, or in divination. So I like to use them in so many different ways, just because they're really hands-on. You can draw them on yourself. You can create the sigils. You can create the bind runes. You can create staves. You can do all. As a creative person and an artist, I also like to do that too. I'm fascinated by using these symbols in different ways.
Oh yeah, I love creating the staves and the bind runes, and trying to figure out the right way to bring the different runes together to create that stave or bind rune is always kind of fascinating me. And I feel like how you bring it together, well, it probably doesn't matter exactly how you bring it together, but at least in my head, when I'm doing that, it's always kind of trying to take those meanings and connect them in such a way that it amplifies that a little bit.
Right. And it tells a story.
Exactly.
The other awesome part about them being also an alphabet is that we're able to do that. You can write spells with runes, and then you can tell the story with if you're doing a rune stave, being able to write, you should be able to see the story, just like if you're doing divination. Sometimes you'll lay those out, and to me, it's It's kind of like that Percy Jackson thing where all of a sudden the words get all scrambled and boop, now they're in English. Now you can read them. And you're like, oh, now it's a story.
Yeah, yeah.
But since I was doing that, I felt that it was something that I wanted to put in the book, just so that you can use the runes every day. A lot of people don't necessarily, and I don't necessarily read for myself, of course, every day. And I don't, so I wanted to do something so where you can, no matter what you're doing, whether you're cooking food or whether you're actually doing a spiritual ritual or whatnot, you can incorporate the runes into them every day. Like when I would go to work at a local bookstore, metaphysical bookstore and rock shop. And I got to work with all the rocks, and I found that there was a lot of correlations. Runes themselves have correlations with the stones, crystals,
Oh
herbs,
yeah.
all the stuff we were working with. And I go in there and we're writing runes on our hands to have good positive energy throughout the day for their customers and whatnot. So that was a good couple of years when I worked there that really kind of expanded that, because you're working with all sorts of people in all sorts of different spiritual places. Not just, in fact, most of the people that I read have never had a rune reading before, and they don't even know much about runes, but they're really fascinated. So I found that really inspiring.
Oh yeah, there's a metaphysical shop not too far from me that they have a guy who will occasionally do rune readings for people, and it's always a line out the door waiting for that, because people they love the tarot and all that, but
Mm-hmm.
for runes just have a different feeling to them, and
Right.
people want that more primal fortune telling, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak, that runes provide. That tarot cards, which even though tarot cards are pretty old, they're still relatively modern compared to runes.
Right. And I'm not even sure how old tarot is as far as it being a divination tool. I mean, runes are, you know, thousands of years old, but they weren't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily always or used for divination or and magic, you might say. But so it's interesting to also see the growth of rune use and practice throughout since the 60s to now, and how that's changed and people's perception of that, being into runes. But as far as the divination tool, it's my favorite, and I always like the aspect of being able to make them myself. If
Mm-hmm.
you wanted, of course, you can always go buy them, but making them yourself, I thought was really, really impactful.
It kind of
And
binds it to you in a way.
right. Yeah, anything to me, and especially as an artist, anybody that's done art in any way, whether you've sold art or just are, have an affinity for it and like to do it, anything creative like that, to me just helps solidify all the intention that goes into what you're doing. So it's all part of that kind of that energy. If you're a creative person, you like to make the runes, fantastic. If you're not a creative person and you still like the runes, there's runes you can purchase and different ways that you can create simple yet still creative things. I think everybody's creative and everybody's an artist. They just don't know it. So
I would agree with you there. So I do have a question
mm.
with modern rune reading, and I know you mentioned it in your book, the blank rune.
Oh yeah, here we go.
That's a rather controversial subject, and I know for myself personally, I don't use the blank runes.
Mm-hmm.
I prefer to use runes how they were originally meant to be, not the modern version of it. I was just curious, what is your personal take on it?
My personal take is that runes are completely a modern tool. I don't believe they were ever used really for divination in the Viking age. They were used for, and the sigils and all that. I don't think that, for me, I was just like, I understand how it came about, and maybe Blum put it in the book, and I know there's a lot of people that don't like it and whatnot. But for me, since I don't participate in things like a kindred, and I don't necessarily, since I'm more of a rune weaver, I consider being able to use runes in a wide variety of practices. I like it because I've come up with my own meaning for it. I believe it's plays an important role when I do divination for other people. Um,
All right, I can see that when you're dealing with other people, having that blank
mhm.
rune in there, and being able to kind of modify it as you see fit to kind of work with your reading. I mean,
Right,
because since I'm only ever reading for myself,
right,
I don't I just I don't have anything against the blank rune. I just choose not to use it.
right. And you wouldn't need it necessarily. I don't know if I do necessarily if I'm doing a cast for myself or whatnot. I tend to, and here's what my take on it is. I think the blank stave and the Perthro rune have two different meanings. And since I do, I'm into dice and gaming and all that, I
Mm-hmm.
use the Perthro rune as in a slightly different way concerning mystery, concerning the unknown, concerning chance, uh, things like that. And the blank rune to me in a divination for other people sometimes comes in handy because depending on where it's placed, it could mean that they don't want you to go any further in that area. You don't need to know. It wasn't something we were supposed to talk about in this session. Sometimes it means that there are just things coming at you from all over the place. It's not one specific thing, but you've got issues coming in from different areas that you are supposed to go through. You're not meant to know the answer to, and it's not meant to have a meaning. The meaning itself is kind of that unknown, that kind of mystery of the universe, which I think goes over all of the runes. I think that it's important only because it is almost that encompassment of all of it, all the runes together. When that shows up in somebody's reading, especially like in the now, that's always a fun thing. I always do mention, okay, yeah, that's on your perspective. It looks like there's a whole lot happening and you don't know where it's coming from, why it's happening, and all of this. And people are just like, yes, oh my gosh. Yeah. So I've had so many more positive responses to my meanings of the blank rune when it comes in to a divination reading that
Mm-hmm.
I keep it because it comes in handy. And I'm not a stickler for tradition. I honor my spiritual practice in my own way, and I don't even profess a whole lot of that online so much as my own personal belief systems and whatnot, because I've had to deal with people that are straight up of all different types of spiritual beliefs sitting across from me at my table, whether they're Christian or they're into the Egyptian pantheon or they're working with other Greek gods or they're just witches or they don't have any idea. I've had to deal with all of them, and it to me it's I just don't like the not that I don't like it. I don't necessarily hold to anybody else's idea of tradition. We'll put it that way.
That's fair.
So yeah,
Yeah,
I don't.
and I completely understand that point, and I have nothing against that. I know
Sure.
for myself personally, I really like the sticking with tradition for myself. It makes me feel more connected to the gods and
Mhm.
whatnot. But every now and then you see, Celtic stuff kind of wiggling its way in, and which I mean, I started doing all this through Wicca, which is very Celtic based, and
Yeah.
then the Norse kind of came in and took over. But you still get those little bits of Celtic in there, and
Mhm. Yeah, I think I had gone away from hardcore tradition on any religion. I don't do any religion at all. I don't like the organizations. I don't do that. But I was raised Buddhist. I was and still am. I would consider myself, as far as a philosophy, a Buddhist, a witch, all of them. I've practiced all of them, and I feel like it's not my place to be to really hold true to any tradition. The more that I studied, also, I learned that there wasn't really a whole there wasn't a lot of tradition that I can actually latch on to.
mhm.
Everything I knew about the runes or learned about the runes showed me that there was no tradition in divination or even them used in magic. There wasn't a tradition in even any way that it's portrayed outside of uh, strict historical journals and books. Viking life or Nordic life at that time, it's very hard to find actual real traditional representations of all that. So I kind of am not sure exactly what to put in to as far as tradition goes because I don't believe a lot of it is. I feel a lot of it has been lost and a lot of it
Oh,
we've made up and it's modern. And I just
yeah.
want to honor the idea of the tradition.
Hmm.
When you're working with the gods, I still work with the gods. I work with that, and I have ideas on what that means to people and what some people they believe they are actually working with a god. Other people believe they're working with a godlike energy. Other people believe that they're paying tribute to the energies and energies of the gods in a sense. So I'm open to all of it.
Yeah, and Norse especially, we're missing so much of the history of the Norse because they didn't have books and paper and all that. We have what was written a couple hundred years after
Right.
the Viking era, and so who knows how much we're truly missing from that. So we got to kind
Right.
of just. I know for myself, I try to stick to historical as much as I can, and then it gets augmented with modern stuff because you have to. We have an incomplete
Huh.
story.
And we're living in a modern age.
Yeah.
I'm sure that if I've been told that, purchased runes are they have no value and no power and they don't work and you should just always, make your own, and then you need to blood them and all this. And I'm like, okay, no, I'm sure that if a, if a shaman in the Viking age had access to a Dremel, he might very well use it. So I'm
Exactly.
like, if they had the tools and things that we do, they do a podcast and
Oh,
they'd
sure.
write a book. And so I kind of look at it like I'm a modern rune worker. I'm a modern rune weaver, and my whole goal in this lifetime is to try and present that to people in a way that everybody can either understand it, and if they jive with it, if they resonate, they can get on board, and if not, then they find their own way to do it. So I'm always looking for my own way to do things, which doesn't necessarily rub well with everybody. So
Yeah, no, especially in this field, it seems like you're always going to be rubbing up against somebody, and it's not always the most positive group of people, unfortunately.
yeah, but I think it's getting better. I think the fact that there's
It
more
is.
people out there interested in the runes, seeing how well the runes can go into any other practice, and they know that they don't have to necessarily get all completely in it, into the Nordic spiritualism to use them. That makes me happy, because I think everybody can do what they want to do. I don't I'm not I never am out there saying that that's wrong or you can't do that. I'm like, you do it if you can. I mean, I'm the one that will go out there and say, look, I can do divination by writing the runes on a 24 Care Bears and throwing the Care Bears out in the ground, and I'll be able to read your runes for you, because it's not about the runes, it's the magic of the person. To me, I'm
Now,
always
now, if you did do that with the Care Bears and you made it a point to record that, you'd probably have a huge TikTok page.
oh, maybe. I don't know if I wanted to go that far. It's something I say, but I don't know if I can do that and be like, see, oh, I just got so much flack for that. But I
Yeah,
don't
you
know.
would, but it'd be interesting nonetheless.
Right? I don't know. If you find any Nordic Care Bears would be great. What kind of theme would it be? Oh, did you see if you have Care Bear for each rune, the correlations for the Care Bears and the runes and Lagus with love, and oh gosh, what else do they have? They have them all. So
Yeah.
but I think I'm really about the person. I'm like, you are the magic, and the runes are tools, just like tarot, just like your
Mm-hmm.
wand, just like all the other things like that. And however deep you want to get into it, yeah, that's it. In fact, I don't even go against anybody else's uh, interpretations of the runes. I might raise an eyebrow because, okay, but to me, I realized doing this book actually, when I was working on the first book, I realized that every author, and this is why you should have more than one rune book, please. You should have a bank of rune books, even if they seem like they have the same information, but they don't. Every author, I believe, gets downloaded their own information, their own interpretations. And the whole point is for you to go through and find it. Sometimes I will have studying runes, or I do a reading for myself and I go through and I just go, randomly pick a book, pull it out, and that's the author that has the message I needed to read. And I let my eyes relax. I open up to that rune, I look down and I go, oh, yep, there it is. And it was always right. It's always right on the money. But I think each author has something to say. And I think it's really important that people get multiple books, read through, know what is the foundation meaning of each rune, see how everybody's interpreted each meaning on their own, and then you get to come up with your own. And after a while, I've had several runes expand their meaning over the years that I've been doing it. Like, it just might be one reading at an event or something, and I'll just have this aha moment. I'm like, wow, that just opened up this rune in a whole different way, and I can continue to use that. And sure enough, yeah, it's there. So
Well, that's one of the reasons that I prefer to only read for myself and not for other people, because there's a subconscious element for, regardless of what you're using, tarot or runes or whatever, where if there's a specific question in mind and the way you interpret what comes out, maybe it's fate coming through and telling you what you need to hear. Maybe it's your subconscious coming through and being like, this is kind of what you want it to be. And so I kind of just let that go, and I find it easier if I just do that for myself, and rather than trying to figure out what it means for somebody else, because then it's a much more personal message for myself, even if it's just coming from within.
Absolutely. No, I get that totally. I never really wanted to read for other people, but there was no getting out of it for me. I've been in the spotlight for years. I've already been a musician and, done a whole lot of things where I'm actually doing media, but I like people. I like talking. What I found is that the reason why I read for other people is because I can, as soon as they sit down, I'm getting information from them, and I just seem to get a whole lot. And that came about with some practice and kind of unconscious knowledge, you might say. But yeah, when reading for other people, the thing is you still have to trust yourself. And I always wonder that. I mean, the hardest part is, for me, what I do is I do an intention with the runes, and then I spread them out, and I run my hand over it, and I pick them. I pick all 9 runes, 3 for the now, 3 for the past, 3 for the now, 3 for the future. But I'll run my hand over it, and I'll just pick them. And the hardest part is telling yourself, now I'm not just doing this randomly. It doesn't matter what I pick. It will be the reading they need to hear. And so, but I do really leave myself open to allowing my guides to just guide my hand. And you have to work at it. It's practice. But for other people, when you're reading for them, it's just, you have to be confident with it. And I found that it's on a lot. The other thing I found is, when you're reading for other people, the universe tends to put people in front of you that you also need the information. How do I put this?
I know exactly what you mean. I've experienced that with the paranormal. I do ghost hunting as well.
Okay.
So we always end up, meeting people at the time that we're supposed to meet people.
It happens. And it's so weird. I did a whole podcast on when I was doing, and I got this coming up this weekend. It's a weekend of readings. So it's at an event center, and of course they have all these vendors, and I'm reading runes. So for 2 days straight. And I can't tell you how many times I just could go back home, and I could have been reading, looking in a mirror the entire time. The reason why they're put down in front of me is because I am also, or have gone through, similar situations. And I can talk to them with authenticity because I have. And sometimes I'll be like, okay, yeah, I see what you're doing now. So they put down the people, I'm looking at the rooms going, yep, this is exactly what I'm also needing to hear. So that's one aspect of it about reading for others that comes in handy. It is a way for you to get some insight on yourself. But yeah, I enjoy I really enjoy just that kind of magic that goes on when I'm reading. And it does take, when you lay the runes out, you can just read the meanings and the descriptions. Yeah, that's well and good. But it's always that when they start talking, when you start having a conversation with the client, because your higher self knows exactly what you're supposed to do, and we just choose either to do it or not do it. I'll just, you shouldn't have that last shot. You really shouldn't. You have had enough whiskey, but one more shot. Why not? It's my birthday. Okay, Luke. And you do it anyway. So it's the same kind of way. When you are, your subconscious your higher self is really powerful. And this is just, usually rune readings are just confirmations of that. It brings it out, but it's only in the conversation with the person that I always find out. I'm like, oh, that's why that rune's there. That's why it's reversed. Okay. And if I'm sitting there, and they kind of look like, well, I don't know, maybe. And then I just ask them a quick question about it. It opens wide up, and now it reads like a story. And it blows their mind. So it's, on one hand, I would be skeptical on that, because I kind of tend to be accepting of everything, yet just a little skeptical of most things. But wow, the amount of information I can give somebody, the amount of some of these connections that I've made with people have been, I mean, we're both in tears sometimes. Sometimes we'll be in, it's a really impactful practice. And I've been amazed at how accurate it is without having so much information on a card or anything like that. It's kind of like rolling the bones.
It's quite amazing how accurate the runes can be. I know there's been a few times where, so for a long period of time, I've picked a single rune every day, and I'll just stick my hand into the bag, and whichever one felt like the one I needed to pull, I pull that out. And there's been a few times where I've pulled that out, and like, that's not really what I wanted to hear. So I put it back, mix it back up, go to pull another one, and I pull the exact same one. And
Yeah.
then my fiance would come over with her tarot deck, and I pull a card there, and it's a card that means the exact same thing. And so when you get that over and over and over again in the same day, the probability of that being purely chance goes down to near zero.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it really goes and adds validity to what the runes are capable of.
And it's about, again, it depends on your now how worldwide world how knowledgeable you are, not just of the meanings of the runes, but how good are you at knowing your own self if you're doing it for yourself. Because again, you'll know, your subconscious will know, and be like, I don't want this one. When I do the daily rune pulls, I kind of avoided that when I did a 30-day rune working with the runes for 30 days. I did a rune a day for 30 days, and then I did a rune a week for 24 weeks, and that was brutal. I was like, oh boy, great. And the rune a day was one of those things. And so what I do is I pull out one, I go, what rune should I learn about today? Or what rune do I need to learn about today or experience? And I'll pull it out. And this kind of kept that kind of, and for other people, it kept that kind of fear of like, well, what if I pull, Hagal or Nauthis, or what if I pull a bad rune, I'm like, no, it's one that you need to learn about. Right. Yeah. It's not about that. Each one, all the runes, if you put them all together, and just like the Norse pantheon or any pantheon, you put all the gods together, it equals one human being, just different aspects. And so I would pull it out and I'd go, okay. So I'd go through the day and I would experience, I'd go with that rune. And I remember one time I had one and I just wasn't, I went through the whole day, and near the end of the day, I was like, wow, I didn't experience anything. I was going to journal it. I didn't really get anything from this rune. I don't know why it's in my hand, why I pulled it. And then I get a call out of the blue from a friend of mine who was going through some relationship issues, and just out of the blue. And it happened to be exactly the meaning. I was like, what? Wait. And I grabbed a book and we opened it up to that room page and I read it out, and he started crying. I started crying. And that's what it was for. Is for me to be able to realize it. And then it was for somebody else. Yeah. So yeah, it's kind of that's an experience. And for those that are looking to get into runes, what you're saying right there is perfect. It's a perfect intro. Just pull a rune every day.
Oh yeah, it's
carry it with you, write it down, pull the same rune the next day, do it again, bullet point it down, write the same things, and look around and see how you can see it in nature, see how you can see the symbol all around you, and then see if you notice different aspects of what that rune is. And it's not to be a rune to guide your life that day. It's that rune, it's the way you're studying the rune. There's only one way you can learn the runes, and it's by existing with them, living them. Right.
Yeah.
So you look around every day, you look around all day long for, what does Fehu mean? Okay, yeah. You look at every time you make a transaction, you look at the news, you look at different friends' posts and whatnot, and who's having abundance, who's not. And you get to see all aspects of what Fehu is. And it really opens it up for you. So when you go back through that journal, wow, you've got a wealth of your own information, not just the author's information.
Yeah, that's a really great idea of using your journal along with it, which when I pull a rune every day, I don't do that. Pulling a rune every day has certainly helped me through some very difficult times in my life, kind of kept me a little bit more positive and kept me moving forward. But I really like the idea of pulling a rune and actually keeping a journal, writing down what it means, and then kind of throughout the day, just sitting down with it and rewriting what it means. But as the day has progressed and how your thoughts on it have changed with what you've seen that day.
Right, exactly, because you were living it at that point. No, that's exactly it. I loved it. It does get, and again, when you're looking at it where it's a rune that's just part of the universe and not necessarily meant for you that day. It's meant for you to learn about that day, because there's an importance to it. You might, again, like run into somebody else that needs that kind of wisdom that you can now give them with some practical experience, rather than just the letters on a page, like the foundational meaning of it. So yeah, I encourage everybody to do that. It's always a good thing. Doing it a week for a week is a challenge as well. You should try that sometime. You grab a rune and you live with that for a week. Thursaz. Oh my gosh, I remember my wife even remembers that. She's like, "Oh God, I remember we went through a week of Thursaz." Oh, it's all about learning how to use all of the energies, both in a positive way, whether it's Thursaz or Hagal. Okay, hail, great. Am I going to go through a week of challenges? No, you're going to go through a week of learning how. You go through a week of every day is a challenge, whether you carry that rune in your pocket or not. Every day you're overcoming challenges. When you're focusing on that, though, when you have, like, say, like Perthro in your pocket, and you're overcoming your to-do list throughout that week, and you've got challenges coming up, then you can use that almost as a shield to help you get through all of that in a successful manner, or in a manner that helps you grow or learn. Still a success, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Same with Hagal, you get those challenges going through every day. You got to deal with the hailstones. And again, you can hold that shield up and be like, okay, yeah, bring them on. Whole point is to overcome the challenges and to grow. So give me all you can. I want to grow as much as I can this week. You got Lagos, and you're being like water. You're going to flow like water all week long. And you're learning different ways that situations will arise, and then you're going to have that rune with you. And you're going to either choose to move like water around it, flow with it, or you're going to be a dam, and you're going to back it all up. And you'll see that working with it for a week. It just is super apparent. And then even if you're not doing divination for others, it's a good practice to do. I think it's really helps you expand the way that you bond with runes in your own life.
In addition to that, it's probably really good for your own mental health, and able to help you kind of focus on one aspect of your life and improve it for that week, and then move on to the next aspect, kind of break it down into small pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. Because each one, I mean, if we were to lay out all the runes and just sit there with it, and you go over each rune, you just you pick up each rune and you look at it and what it means, you can find some aspect of that that's dealing with your life right now. All the way through with all that, you can find an aspect of it. As you go through the entire runes of where you're at, you're going to find out runes that have way more impact. Like, where am I at? So lay them all out, find out. Don't, yep, no, none. Oh, wow. Yeah, this is really happening in my life right now. So this set of 3. So it's, yeah, all of that. Those are experiences. I'm like going back now, thinking of those weeks. I'm like, oh my gosh. Okay, great. And,
Yeah, it sounds like it'd be a really interesting way to go about doing some shadow work. And
yeah, runes are great for shadow work.
yeah.
Shadow work is really important because I think a lot of the runes address that right up front. Whether it's challenges with Hagal, whether it's say just working on your foundation, your basic needs with Nauthiz, they're all right there. Shadow work was something that just had Kadrick Olson on my show, and then he did a class here in town, and his book Runes for Transformation was fantastic. He's been on Gaia, he's been on Nor, he's been on all those shows, and I was just a little fangirl about it when he came. I was like, oh, a super down to earth guy. And then he did this class on shadow work, and my gosh, yeah, talk about the universe putting people in front of you when you need them. This opened up a whole lot, changed a whole trip that I had coming up after that, my attitude towards a whole lot of things, really being able to open up and use the runes in a way where it wasn't so difficult to address the shadows. You can use them in a way that allows you to realize that they are shadow. Yeah, these are shadows. These are things that I can actually take care of, and I'll feel a whole lot happier if I do. And yeah, it's nice to have multiple sets too. So they're like your companions, your friends.
Mm-hmm. So do you use a different set of runes for reading other people versus working with yourself?
Yeah, I do. Mainly because the runes that I use for other people, I designed. I have a laser cutter, an etcher, and I drew up some runes. The runes that I use for other people currently are bigger, and it's mainly a practical thing. I need runes that are flat, are pretty uniform on the back, because I'm laying them out. I'm doing a layout rather than a casting or a toss for other people. And the ones I have they're about 3 inches. They're kind of big tiles. I made those because over COVID I was doing a lot of video rune readings, and it was just hard for the camera to see all the runes, and my eyes aren't getting any better. So Plus, people are used to tarot, so I would use these at the table that looked a little more like cards. It made people feel maybe a little more comfortable. I'm not sure, but I really like them. They seem to be insanely accurate, and they're just big enough for me to when I put my hand over them, they work really well. But I like for my own use, I have runes that I cast. I tend to do when I do my own readings, I'll cast the runes or I'll toss them. So I have runes that I've made that are specifically for that. If my wife and I do a reading, we use a special set of runes that we cut from a tree branch that we planted on our wedding when we got married, and now it's big. And one of them fell off or in a storm, so we use that as we made those, and that's our family runes. But yeah, I've tried different ones for other people, but it's really always about practicality, not really about anything else except for that I reserve a couple of my sets just for my own stuff because they seem to work really well for me. Plus, I don't want to take them everywhere and lose them one. So
yeah, that's a big one. You don't, especially if if they're expensive or you put a lot of work into them, or if they're just that special to you, you don't want to risk losing them.
no.
Yeah, I have one set that just it never leaves the house. That it's made out of antler, and I've done the blooding ritual with them, and it's I use those when I'm doing a big reading on myself. I don't even use those for daily rune pulls. I have a different set just for that.
Yeah. No, yeah, and I think that's a good thing too. I like assigning different sets for different purposes. Gosh, I got mini runes. I got runes of all sizes, extra large runes. I've got a rune that's like 2 foot. It's sitting on my wall, and then I've got runes that are maybe a centimeter big that somebody had made and got or made for me one day because we like miniatures as well. I do miniature work, and so they made me a 1/12 scale rune set, which was I think made out of
that's pretty small.
Oh, it's like a pinhead size. It was ridiculous. Not that you can cast with them, but it's fun. But I like seeing different runes made out of different things and what people could do. I've made them out of shells before and used sand to drop them in so they would land without bouncing all over. It's really, yeah, I like them. I like different sets like that.
Yeah.
Again, I think it's super creative.
Oh yeah. I've for a while I was making resin sets to sell, mainly because I just wanted to practice working with resin, but I would do different ones. Like I'd have a water-based one, an earth-based one, a fire-based one, and pick the colors and some things to put inside them to kind of fit with those different things.
Yeah, and that's really fun too. They've got some great molds out there. I've done the same thing on my Etsy site. And it's a good practice for using resin, but it was always neat to kind of be able to add elements into the runes that kind of correspond, that add things like I would add in pyrite or different stones or herbs, things like that, to the resin because you can at that point, which is really neat.
So how have you gotten into all this? Have you always been into the runes, or did something happen to kind of push you this way, or what?
Yeah, that story's really weird.
I love weird stories. Go for it.
Weird with a Y. Well, yeah, I mean, I remember in high school, let's see, it was about 82, 83. We actually had not only a Greek mythology class, we had a Norse mythology class, which I was like, okay, yes, I like that. I mean, and when you're a kid and you're getting into the Norse myths, man, they're horrifying. It's like, whoa, none of these gods are good. This is all terrible. Wow. And but I loved it, and I took the class twice, and I just love Norse mythology, ancient history, and Greek history, and all that. I loved all those. And so over the years between that and playing Dungeons and Dragons, I got in D&D, of course, in the 80s, like all nerds with no girlfriends do. And I would get into the Tolkien runes, and I really like different languages like that. So I was able to write them, read them, just without thinking about it. I would do a lot of artwork and a lot of notes and whatnot in Dwarven runes. And I think I knew over the years that was a thing, but I really wasn't into the Norse aspect at all at that point. I really was more into the adventuring. I was a kid, so I was growing up. And then you went to the Air Force. I was a firefighter for a while, even up there. And then it was all the Buddhist phase. So I was learning all this stuff about my own inner spirituality and what that means, which I think is a great background before getting into Norse mythology and Norse practice. Same thing with Native American studies or anything like that. Boy, it's great to have multiple spiritual practices under your
It's
belt.
kind of amazing the number of parallels between Native American beliefs and
Yeah,
practices and the Norse.
yeah. It, and I don't know exactly how to explain that. I think it's mainly because the whole, kind of practice of the people is for the earth and the land
Mm-hmm.
and whatnot. It's pretty, yeah. It's much like that. I mean, when I was a kid, I was in Indian guides. It was almost like Boy Scouts in California. We learned about Native American culture and history, and so that was all happening. And then it was just one day, this was after I was doing gaming and whatnot for years, and really being a musician for years. I think I came upon the bookstore that I was ended up, having some working with for a while. I picked up a set of runes. I saw runes, and I was like, "Oh, this is interesting. Wow, I know these runes. Wait, these aren't Tolkien runes. What are these? Oh, runes are actual things. What? Oh, wow." And I and I and I picked them up, and at that point in my life, I must have been ready to go down that path. And I think everybody needs to realize when it's okay if you haven't earlier. It's just when you're ready to go down that path, you will find that and you will go, because it was like a lightning strike. I had those runes in my hand. Then I went and got a book. My first book was from Lisa Purcell, and Lisa Purcell had the Guide to Runes. It's a little pocket book. I've gone through 3 of them. I just read it and read it and read it, wore them out. But I sat there and I read it, and oh my gosh, this is fantastic. I love this for some reason. And I really wanted to get more into spirituality and more into my metaphysical life. And so I did. And I really just started going at it and really learning about them. I learned later that my great grandfather came to America from Norway, which was kind of like, what? Oh, yeah. And it's a town called Brekke by the Sonum Fjord. And I'm like, okay, this is making sense. This is all synchronous. So I did that. And then I had one of the local psychics here that's got a store. She does classes, clinics, and everything. She had a classroom. She's like, you should start teaching and reading for others. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I'm not ready for that. And she's like, no, you are ready. And I'm like, really? How do you know? And she goes, I'm psychic. I can know this. And so, like, you are an empath. You can read people just emotionally part with me. You're really good with this, and you would really be good with reading for other people and teaching classes, which I like to be an instructor anyways. I've taught art classes and all that. So I said, okay. So I got into that. And basically, I got thrown right into the fire. I just did it. I just went in and taught classes, and I started reading for other people, and they enjoyed it. They didn't, yell at me or or anything. And I was like, okay, I can do this. And then I realized why over my life, I've been what I consider kind of a jack of all trades. I've done so many different things. And I would always ask the universe, like, why, what am I doing? What am I here for? I'm not, everybody else has got like this career. And here I've been this and I've been this, but you get this far, but you never get it. You get just enough. You get on the radio, you get to go touring, you get to open for, but you're not necessarily the rock star. And you want to go, you were a firefighter for 5 years, but yeah, you didn't want to do that after that. So then you get this and I was a vet tech. I'd done all these things. And I was like, why am I doing all these things? And then one day I had another weekend of reading for people, 12 readings straight. And this was when I was first starting. And it was, I ended up reading for all walks of life. Just every person was significantly different. And I don't think I would have been able to do that if I hadn't gone through everything that I did in my life up to that point. So that's why I think I got into it, and I realized this was the time that I was supposed to get into it. I had done enough stuff in my life to be able to, relate to every single person that sat down in front of me. And then I felt like, yeah, that was my purpose. So yeah.
It's kind of amazing when things just kind of fall into place and you get pushed almost down this path that you weren't necessarily expecting to go down, but as you go down it, it's just everything lines up and you're like, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be.
Right. And if you can accept that, and I think that's a big thing, is allowing yourself to accept it and be okay with it.
Yeah,
so I was
because
like, all right.
more often than not, that's pushing you down a path that might not have been on your plan. And you need to accept that, okay, my plan needs to change. Too many people fight against it and then they don't get to where they're supposed to be going.
And we always have our, to me, it's like a mortal type of direction. We have our mortal compass, yet the universe knows where we're going. They've already got the whole trip laid out.
Mm-hmm.
We're like, no, I'm going this way and I'm gonna, do this. And it was kind of like I look back now and I go on all the jobs that I've had. Oh, I'm so glad I wasn't a rock star. So that I didn't get, like majorly successful doing what I was doing, because I don't think I could have handled it. Plus, we had family and all that kind of thing. And maybe I didn't want to be a firefighter. Maybe that was not meant for me because my heart wasn't completely into it, and I wasn't an artist. I mean, still an artist, and I still do stuff like that, but it was all to help your growth as a human being, because there's so many things out there that you need to experience for other people, even more so than yourself.
Sure. So there's one last thing that I want to kind of pick your brain on while I have you here. Now, you said you're a Buddhist. I have many friends, especially those in the paranormal, who are Buddhist. And I have had several of them ask me this question, and that's, how can you relate the runes to the chakras and kind of create almost a Norse version of the chakras? Have you ever encountered anything like that, or thought about something like that?
Absolutely. I think, in fact, the chakras don't even come to play in my Buddhism as much. My wife's a Reiki master too, and she's like, I got to teach you Reiki, man, because the chakras came into it when I was working in the rock room at this Next Millennium bookstore. I was helping people with their rocks, and it's very much the same type of spiritual intuition or empathy that you get working with stone energy, rock energy. And that wasn't, it was all about it was all about, these rocks have energy and you can tap into that and use them for and the more I read about the rocks, the more they related to the chakra colors. You got your blue rocks and they're a throat chakra, or they're your third eye chakra. You got your purple rocks and they're the crown chakras. They're good Swiss Army tools for everything. You've got your red rocks, and they're the good, solar plexus and root chakra stones. And the more I read about them, the more I was like, hey, that's a meaning to a rune. Why isn't blue apatite? Why don't? And so what I did in my book, I put all the correlations of the rocks and stones, because I would use those chakras, and I knew I was comfortable with that. Again, practicing Buddhism, even though I didn't use the chakras so much, I knew what they were and how they worked with the body's energy. And yeah, so that kind of brought me into, in the book that we had at work, it was a rock book. I had written runes on all the pages with the stone. So blue apatite, no, that's on Zeus, because it's all about communication of all forms and how to help you with this. And so each rock had a rune relation that I could find. So if you want stones, you can find a stone with that same energy as the rune and inscribe the rune on it. So I was really happy with that. And I think a lot of people are into, and I think chakras themselves, those are really important to know what chakras relate to what runes, and what runes you can use if you're doing chakra work. You're going to give a speech, or you're trying to do, you're going to be communicating with people. Well, then you can work on your throat chakra. You can work with this correlating stone with that, and you can work with on Zeus all together. You lick your finger and draw on Zeus on your neck or on your throat. Things like that. As simple as that. That's kind of how I like to work them into it. My Buddhist work doesn't necessarily go into the same thing. My Buddhism, of course, was a chapter of my life, which I still honor and I still do. I mean, to me, it's a philosophy. It was never a religion anyway.
Sure.
And I found a lot of correlations, again, between Buddhism and what some of these runes mean as well. So I just I just folded into my, I guess my potluck of spiritualism that I have.
Well, that's actually really fascinating. And I need to go through your book again, because those correspondences are there. And now I'm thinking I kind of want to create another set of runes using those stone correspondences.
Oh yeah, because you can create a set of runes and have the stones that go with them, and those are the ones that you use, say, in your magical rituals, or if your personal spiritual development. Again, with on Zeus, and say you're giving a speech, or maybe you need to you really want to focus on protection, or you just don't have the courage, and so you can focus on a stone that goes with Thurisaz and bring that in. So yeah, it's pretty fun. The rocks are fun to study, just like the runes are, and they have the same in-depth meanings to them. But as soon as you start studying rocks, you're gonna immediately start seeing runes pop into your head. Boop, boop. Oh yeah. Oh, there's that one. Yep, I can use that one for this. Oh wow. So you can carry a handful of rocks and stones and and runes all together and make a bag out of it, something you could take while you travel or something. So, and
Yeah.
same thing with the herbs. If you're doing rune magic with candles, say you're doing a candle ritual and you're inscribing the runes in a rune stave style on a candle, and then you can correlate the oils that go with that same kind of rune and the herbs that also correspond and that will complement that rune and or ritual. And that's what you that's what you dress the candle with. Easy magic that you can incorporate runes into on an everyday level for any type of witch or rune weaver.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I'm glad I asked that question. That's got my mind kind of going now on some things I can do this winter.
Oh yeah. That's you can go down a rabbit hole for sure. Be careful. It's like, oh, and it's not just like, oh, I can put runes and bedazzle everything with runes. It's not even like that. It's like, wait a minute, I'm doing these practices already. Now I can do them with the runes. Every time I walk back into that store, they come up and they hold their hands up and, would you give me runes on my hands? Okay. And so I sit there, I grab their hand, their finger, and I'll have a Sharpie and I'll look at them and I'll just relax for a minute and try and intuit what rune they need to work with that day. And I'll draw the rune on their fingers, whether it's for protection or vitality, because it's job, it's retail, man, it's tough.
Yeah.
And so they don't necessarily work with runes on a daily basis, but when I'm in there, they do in a weird way that they didn't know about.
Yeah, sometimes you need it in your life, not necessarily every day, but you just need it when you need it.
Right. It's good to have it as just a part of you that you can kind of fall back on or lean on when you need to. And that's what I felt any of these tools for divination or even a Buddhist practice or even anything like that, rituals every day, being into it, say even the Norse, just having a spiritual practice that isn't necessarily based on a religion where you're having to deal with the do's and don'ts of that somebody else has put into place, but this is yours. These are your own do's and don'ts, and your do's and don'ts will change over the time that you're doing them. It's really nice to have as something that you can fall back on and know that you're not helpless and there's nothing you can do about your situation.
Yeah. No, that's great advice. This whole discussion has been fantastic advice, and there's definitely some things that I'm going to be trying, especially trying the rune for a week. That'll be interesting.
Yeah, you should let me know how that goes. I want to find out.
Will.
I would love to find that out.
Yeah, I definitely will do that. But I want to thank you very much for coming on. This has been a great discussion, and I'd love to have you back on again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be my pleasure. So I appreciate you giving me the time and all.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
All right.
It was great having Wayne Brekke on the show. I really hope I do get to talk to him on the show again. If you want to get his book, I'll leave a link down in the description, The Complete Guide to Runes. It's really a fantastic book, and I can't recommend it enough. And his podcast, the Rune Ways Podcast, is phenomenal, and I have been loving it ever since I found out about it. So please, go check that out, buy his book, and follow his podcast. Thanks again, Wayne. Links down in the description. And until next time, Hail say tho ok hugen godum, Thor thick thegi, Odin thick eggy. Hail to you and be in good spirits. May Thor protect you, and may Odin keep you. Good night.